Alright, so today I'm going to take some time to talk a little bit about the differences between knots and twists. Essentially, everybody uses this terminology in different ways, and I know there's going to be some overlap and some disagreements on this, but I'm just going to show you how I like to use the terminology and how I find it most useful for myself. Now, I consider a knot to be associated with any type of movement like a barrel roll or like a hyperloop, while a twist is only in moves more like an air wrap or like a 5-beat weave or a 3-beat weave, where either your arms twist up at the wrist or your poi twist up at the tether. Now first I just want to show you, as far as just how they look, the main differences between a twist and a knot is essentially that in a twist, if I were to let my poi twist up a whole bunch on one side and then just sort of catch it, you can see this sort of candy cane like structure where one poi is twisted down the other with the heads and handles on the same end. So both poi are pointed the same direction. So I would say that one poi is twisted down the other one. Now with a knot, it's actually the opposite direction. One poi twists up the other poi. So I'll show you, if I just add a bunch of knots. Now if you look up close, you see the exact same sort of twisted candy cane-like structure, except for here, the heads are pointed in opposite directions. Now that is visually kind of one of the main differences between how the knots themselves look, or the knots and the twists. But as far as how they behave, it's a little different as well. So most people know this, and people generally learn this right off the bat when they're learning a weave, and this is that essentially if you twist up on one side, you untwist on the other side. Whether or not it's 5 beats on one side and 5 beats on the other, or just 1 beat on one side and 1 on the other. It doesn't really matter how many twists you add, as long as you can keep the poi spinning. When you get to the other side, they will eventually untwist after the same amount of rotations. Now, knots have a similar property, in which case it requires a mirrored action, but instead of from one side to the other, it's with one poi and the other. So in order to tie a knot, I loop one poi through. Now if I wanted to add another knot to that knot, I loop it again. If I want to continue adding knots, I loop it again. The only way to undo this knot is to take the other poi and follow through those same loops. Now, when it comes to barrel rolls and hyperloops, the typical barrel roll or hyperloop is just one knot. Meaning, here you can see there's, hold on. You can see there's one cross right there, where one poi is going one way, the other's going the other way, and they're crossed. Now you can do barrel rolls and hyperloops and ollies with 2 knots, and the way you would do this, as opposed to if you wanted to do, let's say you wanted to do a hyperloop with, instead of 1 twist, 2 twists. All you'd have to do is, instead of twisting on one side and then bringing it to the center, this would be a hyperloop knot with 1 twist, then exiting on the other side after 1 rotation. If you just let them both twist up on the other side before pulling it to the center, you end up with this kind of like really weird looking knot on one side. But no matter how weird it looks, you can always just flip it out on the other side and they'll eventually untwist. But if you wanted to add an extra knot instead of an extra twist to the hyperloop, what you'd have to do is for this case, since I'm entering on my right side, I would let my right poi do 2 beats through the inner hole, while my left poi, the red one, stays on the outside. And I'll show you what this looks like. So essentially, my left poi is going through the center while my right poi stays on the outside. And that's how I add a shit ton of knots. And then if my right poi makes all those same rotations mirrored up through the hole, then it comes out on the other side. Now as far as like the spinability of these types of moves, I can generally, frequently get up to 3 knots and still be able to successfully come out on the other side. I'm just going to show you 2 just so I can actually do it. So it's 1, 2, and then red 1, 1, and 2, and then they come apart, as opposed to just each up through the hole and then apart on the other side. Now, as I have been thinking about this, it led me to realize that a straitjacket has the same amount of knots as a barrel roll. And for a long time, people have been using this term first degree and second degree twist, and it's debatable as to whether or not that's referring to 180 degrees or 360 degrees, and either way it's kind of irrelevant. But if you think about entering a barrel roll, you end up here. Now, the only thing I have to do to go into a straitjacket is not to add another loop by taking the yellow one up through the hole a second time like I was before, but instead all I do is go from this position and tighten it all the way up. Now this does not involve adding extra knots. And I could show you what it looks like to do as close to as I can get to a second degree straitjacket, which would be to do the yellow one on the inside twice and then try to loop in. And just like with a straitjacket, I have yellow one exiting through the top, red one exiting through the bottom, but as you can see in the middle here, there's an extra twist. Now I can't actually spin this move, but this has showed me that the straitjacket is the same kind of knot as a barrel roll. Now, when it comes to knots and twists, there are actually 2 different kind of ways you can look at it. You can have a twisted knot or a knotted twist, and kind of several combinations of the 2 mixed up in different orders. Now I'm not saying that you can actually perform all of these, at least not easily, but you could theoretically say twist up twice on the outside before bringing it to the inside, in which case I have 2 twists and 1 knot, in which case I would throw it out on the outside to take off both of the twists, but as you see I still have 1 knot, to where my yellow one still has to come out of the hole before that knot is undone. And just as well, I can do 1 knot, 2 knots, and then throw it on that side, add a twist, throw it on this side, take the twist off, then come back up, and then go about taking my knots out. And that's where stuff starts to get really weird and really complicated. But a lot of fun, and I suggest you play around with, instead of adding twists, adding knots, which would mean taking 1 poi and leaving it in the center for an extra rotation before letting the other poi follow. So normally in a hyperloop, if I start leading with my yellow poi, the yellow poi comes up through the negative space and the red poi immediately follows up to undo it. But you can have the red poi stay on the outside while the yellow poi will make an extra rotation, and then you let the red poi start to make its rotations to undo what the yellow poi has been doing. So I hope some of that made sense, and I hope you guys can have fun with it, and let me know what you think.